Chad, a large country in Africa's Sahel region. The Sahel has become yet another stage for geopolitical rivalry, with multiple nations vying for influence. But a lesser-known and an unlikely player has now joined the list of competitors. The player is Russia's close ally, Hungary, which might be embarking on its Africa adventure through Chad. Moscow's friend, Budapest, over the past year, has been working to build ties with the Central African nation. Hungary has opened a diplomatic mission in the Sahelian nation, launched a humanitarian center, and has also offered military assistance by deploying its troops. Last month, the Chadian president, Mohamed Idris Deby, visited Budapest for a 2-day state visit and met with Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The two leaders had finalized the terms of the humanitarian package worth over $200 million, marking Hungary's first aid treaty with an African nation. This aid will target Chad's agriculture and education sectors and help to boost digitalization. An additional $1 million will go to funding Chad's healthcare. Orban also announced 200 Hungarian soldiers will be deployed to Chad to train local forces against armed groups. Though the number of troops are not many, but the overall aid seems huge from a country which is 14 times smaller than Chad, and so far has had no business or interest in the country. Many critics see Chad as an uncharted territory for Hungarian diplomacy, and also to point out costs and the risk of such a mission. The Hungarian government, however, claims that its mission is in line with its commitment to fight migration. As per Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, migration from Africa to Europe cannot be stopped without cooperation with countries of the Sahel region. And as per him, Chad is key in Europe's fight against illegal migration. With this explanation, Orban's plan has won the European Union's blessing, which has welcomed Hungary's mission in Chad. But is this just about migration, or is there more to Orban's plan? You see, in the past decade, the Sahel region has seen a growing number of countries increasing their presence by helping them to fight extremism. The region that lies below the Sahara has faced rising levels of violence from terrorists and armed groups. Chad, which occupies a crucial position in the region, has also faced similar problems. Now, Viktor Orban is also Russian President Vladimir Putin's closest ally and friend in the European Union. And from what it seems, he could be helping his friend to win the Russia versus West Cold War in Africa. In the past decade, the Western nations, like the United States and France, launched several counter-terrorism operations in the region by deploying their troops. However, in the past few years, with a growing anti-West sentiment, Western troops have been expelled, while Russia has made significant inroads. Chad is presently the only Sahelian nation for the West, and about 1,000 French soldiers are deployed in Chad, along with about 100 American troops. However, in May of this year, the Chadian authorities expelled some of the U.S. troops due to a disagreement over their operations. Now, this was followed by Chad president's visit to Russia in January, where Putin offered security assistance to the African nation. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also visited Chad in June. So experts believe that Hungary's maneuvering in Chad could be on Russia's behalf, while some say Budapest might also be looking out for its own interests. Like any other European nation, it is also aiming to become more influential and is eyeing Africa's crucial minerals and resources. Hungary has historically had a weak presence in Africa, but Orban might be trying to change that. Speculations about Orban's endgame continue. Now, a recent investigation by the French paper Le Monde revealed that Gaspar Orban, Viktor Orban's son, was one of the diplomats shuttling between Chad and Hungary in the past year. The younger Orban is not a state official and had not previously undertaken diplomatic assignments. So it has raised questions whether the new friendship with Chad is meant to secure private benefits for the Prime Minister. To understand what actually could be Putin's ally Viktor Orban's endgame in Chad, we are being joined by Paul Maley, a consulting fellow at the Africa Programme at the International Affairs think tank Chatham House. Now, Paul is joining us live from London. Thank you for being with us.
Good afternoon. A pleasure to be with you.
Great. Now, what strategic or political interests does Viktor Orban's Hungary have in the Sahel region, particularly in sending troops to Chad? Is this primarily about influence or another form of cooperation?
Well, I think it's actually more motivated by the Hungarian agenda. Although it's certainly true that Orban is the European leader who has the best relations, probably the only leader in the EU with good relations with Russia, I don't think this should really be seen in the same bracket as the Russian military presence, the Africa Corps, the former Wagner presence of Russian military contractors in the central Sahelian states, Mali, Burkina Faso, and possibly Niger, where the French have been forced to pull out. I think this is more because Orban is keen to raise Hungary's own international experience and profile and engagement. Since the withdrawal of Western forces from Afghanistan, Hungary hasn't really had an international field of operations for its military anywhere. So there hasn't been any situation where the Hungarian military can get experience, if you like, of operating abroad outside of the normal sort of frameworks of NATO in Europe. And so, in fact, the Hungarians had hoped to join Takuba, which was a mission of special forces from a range of Western European countries, European Union member states, who were operating in eastern Mali and then in the Niger border zone in fighting jihadists. But Takuba had to be wound up after the breakdown, after the coups in those countries, and the military regime's demands that the Western troops be pulled out. So that opportunity for Hungary to have gained experience in sending soldiers to operate in Takuba was missing. And so therefore, the Hungarians were looking for a new location in which they could get some sort of international experience. A further factor is that Hungary is one of the European countries that's taking the toughest line on migration of people from Africa into Europe. Hungary has refused to accept any migrants, and its argument has been that it must therefore help African countries tackle their problems in Africa. So that means helping with both development and with security. So I think those are the bigger drivers, really.
Right. Right. So, Paul, in your view, this isn't really seen as a part of a coordinated effort between Budapest and Moscow. But what will the influence be in terms of geopolitics and influence in Africa?
Well, it's a useful thing, actually, for Chad as well, because although Chad's main military partnership, as your film report explained, is with France, and there are around 1,000 French troops, and in fact, some Americans, having been forced to leave in May, have been invited back recently. Chad finds it useful to remind its traditional Western partners that there are other options. President Déby is keen, if you like, to expand his range of partners, expand his range of choices. So there being a deepening diplomatic relationship with Russia, though not a military one. And the fact that Hungary will bring the experience of being a NATO country with NATO type of knowledge and therefore potentially understanding of, if you like, Western military approaches, but happens to also be a country that has these good relations with Russia, is kind of useful for President Deby in reminding France that Chad does have other choices. Chad was having some disagreements with France a bit earlier this year, though those seem to have been patched up when President Deby visited Paris recently and met President Macron. But it's really useful for the Chadians to show that they have a range of partners. How practically useful the Hungarian soldiers will be on the ground, that's a different question, because the Sahel is a very tough operating environment, and Hungary has no prior experience of operating there. And it seems that actually the Hungarian troops are going to depend on the French for some of their logistical support. So it's possibly more useful for the Hungarians than it is for Chad. But I'm sure the Russians won't be displeased, but I don't think it's part of a coordinated strategy for Moscow. And I think there is one other small further point which is worth making, is that smaller European countries, obviously if you're a big donor like France or Germany or as the UK was in the past, you may have a very wide range of African countries with whom you partner. But if you're a small European country, you want to have that international presence and experience, but you can't realistically deploy it all over the continent. And so smaller countries have selected partners. Luxembourg, for example, traditionally has done a lot of development support in the Sahel because it's focused its expertise just there. And so the Hungarians have selected a very small number of countries. I think Mozambique may be one of the others, where Hungary is providing development support. And it's quite useful for the Hungarians now. They've put a foot, if you like, in Francophone Western or West Central Africa, which was a region really where Hungary had no presence before.
Right. Absolutely. Paul, thank you very much for joining us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued analysis on the latest out of Chad.
You're very welcome.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election, explains how America chooses its president, your primer on the race to the White House, everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained, every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.